evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. It is the 27th of January today. And in the studio this evening, joining me to dissect the evening's news stories is Chris McCusker from the Socialist part of the SNP. Welcome
and
again, Chris.
And the trade union group as well.
And the trade union group. Okay, Chris. So, well, straight into action tonight, and big news from the Scottish Government this evening is a plan to issue a Scottish visa. Proposals for a new Scottish visa to address depopulation and to cut skills gaps have been unveiled by the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. The proposals have been designed to work with devolution, but the principles and practical measures proposed could be adapted should Scotland become independent in the future. Under the current constitutional arrangements, the Scottish Government plan could see responsibility for immigration policy split with the UK Government. Migrants wanting to live in Scotland could choose to apply for a Scottish visa or one of the existing immigration routes offered by the UK Government. Residence in Scotland and maintaining the Scottish tax code would be a requirement for such a visa. These proposals are important and urgent. In contrast to the rest of the UK, all of Scotland's population growth for the next 25 years is projected to come from migration. And yet, the new UK Government immigration controls and the end of free movement after Brexit are expected to exacerbate the risk of skills gaps and labour shortages in Scotland. The First Minister said today, migration to Scotland supports economic growth and the delivery of public services and helps to address the serious issue of long-term demographic change, as well as enhancing and sustaining our communities. And yet the latest proposals from the UK Government to control immigration and to end the freedom of movement would be disastrous for our economy and society and would risk acute labour shortages. Migration is an issue which is crucial for our future, but the Scottish Government doesn't currently have the powers needed to deliver tailored immigration policies for Scotland. Devolving immigration powers by introducing a Scottish visa would allow Scotland to attract and retain people with the skills and attributes that we need for our communities and our economy to flourish. A range of stakeholder groups have backed the Scottish Government's plan for a devolved Scottish visa system, piling pressure on the UK Government to engage seriously with the proposals. The Home Office have responded to the proposals by dismissively stating that immigration will remain a reserved matter. A Home Office spokesperson said the UK Government will introduce a points-based immigration system that works in the interests of the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland. We want to understand the specific needs of the whole UK, which is why we have engaged extensively with stakeholders across the UK, including the Scottish Government. The SNP MSP Tom Arthur commented, industry and employers recognise that getting the migration system right is vital for our social and economic well-being, and support shown for the Scottish Government's proposals are heartening. Considering that support, the UK Government need to do much better than a curt dismissal. Simply dismissing this serious plan out of hand proves our point that Westminster doesn't work for Scotland. Andrew McRae, the FSB's Scotland Policy Chair, said, a new paper from the Scottish Government is timely and evidence-based intervention. It sets out a pathway towards a UK system that can flex for Scotland's distinct demographic and economic needs without creating additional burdens for smaller businesses. The UK Government should acknowledge that it is possible and desirable to enable its immigration system to respond to different regions and nations, as well as maintain strict border controls and a user-friendly system. Sarah Tyam, the Chief Executive of the Scottish SCDI, Sarah Tyam, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Council for Development and Industry, said, Scotland has distinct needs in immigration. At the SCDI, we've long advocated for a differentiation from the UK system, which is geared towards reducing net migration. Claire Slipper, Political Affairs Manager of the NFU in Scotland, said, pleased to hear from Nicola Sturgeon and Ben McPherson at Migration Policy event this morning that the Scots Government supports the NFU tweet's view that Scotland's rural areas need open and flexible migration policy options. Sve Mish, the Research and Policy Manager of At Scotland IS, said, Scotland's distinctive needs require a distinctive migration policy, says Nicola Sturgeon. It is not radical for regional governments to have a distinctive migration policy. Chris Deerin, Director of Reform Scotland, said, "We welcome this intervention by the Scottish Government. It's a step in the right direction, and even if the specific system proposed does not come to fruition, it should be taken seriously by the UK Government and treated as a starting point for a conversation and agreement." So here we go, Chris, another seemingly extremely good idea from the Scottish Government.
Which is dismissed.
But did we expect the British government to take any notice of this?
Well, no, just as I say there, Gordon, anything that the Scottish Government propose, Boris Johnson is just going to dismiss out of hand and just simply not give it the time of day. That goes along with his narrative of this one nation conservatism that he envisages for the country, you know, the UK government coming out with, we will come out with a system that suits everybody, and therefore, you know, like just basically putting us to the side once again.
So do you think this is the classic definition of a compromise, where it's something which nobody likes at the end of the day? In other words, a one-size-fits-all system that doesn't serve any of the countries and regions of the UK properly.
Yeah. And not only that, but this is the first. You could use this as a litmus test for going forward as to how we're going to get treated, and you know, further down the line, we will come out with proposals that are nuanced proposals
that are
for
helpful.
Scotland.
Yeah.
You know,
But
because
still
nobody knows Scotland better than the Scottish
people
Parliament.
who run it. Yes.
So these are formulated to benefit the people of Scotland, in a plethora of areas of community, of work, of economic strategy.
Different interests and different industries as well.
You know, so it makes perfect sense. But as I say, the way that Boris Johnson will treat it is that you know, you're going to constantly get dismissed, which is great. It suits us to be constantly dismissed, because the more and more times that we're constantly dismissed, we get more and more independent supporters. All
right, well, let's move on to the next item, Chris, and we'll see how we go on with this one. Okay, now, we all know what the claim of right is, but the SNP's MP, Patricia Gibson, will lead a debate in Westminster this evening. In fact, I believe it's at 10 o'clock, to call on the UK government to respect the people of Scotland as sovereign. The debate follows Boris Johnson's withdrawal bill passing through Parliament and gaining royal assent, despite the devolved legislatures of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all refusing to give consent to the bill. As part of the devolution settlement, Westminster is required to seek the consent of the Scottish Parliament and the devolved assemblies if it wants to pass laws in devolved areas. In commenting, Ms Gibson said, "In 3 days, Scotland will be dragged out of the EU by a Tory government which is treating Scotland with utter contempt. The Tories are hell-bent on damaging hard Brexit, despite the devolved legislatures of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all refusing to give consent to the withdrawal agreement, and despite the people of Scotland voting to remain in the EU in 2016. We have been told time and again that we are a union of equals. And yet, instead of respecting Scotland's decision, the Tories have cast it to one side and are riding roughshod over the devolution settlement. It's clear beyond any doubt that Scotland will never be treated as an equal partner in the UK. The stark difference in the political direction of Holyrood and Westminster in over the past 4 years makes it even more crucial that the will of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people is respected. The SNP will always defend the sovereignty of the Scottish people. While there has been much progress since devolution, the Tory government in London, which has not won an election in Scotland in over 60 years, is dragging Scotland out of the EU against its will. Scotland must have the choice over whether it wants to prosper as an independent country inside the EU or face a bleak future with jobs and livelihoods in jeopardy as part of Brexit Britain. So very clear there what she feels about Brexit.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, the Claim of Right, as we know, is a legal document. It is, in fact, a piece of legislation, isn't it, which passed in Westminster in 2018, I believe.
Last year, a year and a half ago.
But it was part of a debate, I believe.
Yeah.
But the government in Westminster put up no objections to it. They didn't
Absolutely no
argue about
resistance.
it, and it seemed to pass without.
Yeah. And not just that as well. It garnered some support from the Labour benches as well.
That's interesting. So now we have a debate this evening in which an adjournment debate this evening, which will probably be the last time this topic is discussed before Nicola Sturgeon makes whatever her presentation is going to be on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So this is an important evening, isn't it? But why is the timing so critical for this, do you think?
Well, it's to get it out there front and centre and make sure that everybody understands that this is the crux of our drive.
This is our argument for
This is
self-determination.
our argument for self-determination, and it has to be front and centre on the table, so that it can be looked back retrospectively. If Boris Johnson comes out, which he always will do, by saying, nah, you're not getting this, you're not getting that, and we can always go back and say, well, look, we've got the Claim of Right. It was passed by your government. It recognises Scotland's right to, determine its own future.
I'm just being told that the Claim of Right wasn't passed by the government, but
well, it was agreed to be recognised by the government.
But it was a debate in which the government benches didn't take part; they disappeared. But there was it was accepted by acclamation. It was unanimously accepted.
The Tory front bench wasn't there in that debate. I concede that. But there were Tory backbenchers and Labour backbenchers who were in that.
I understand that the former or the ex-Secretary of State David Mundell spoke in that debate as a government minister. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
But it seems that the issue of the Claim of Right was not contested.
No, it
and I
wasn't
think that's
contested,
the issue here.
Aye.
So now we're going to be discussing this issue again at 10 o'clock this evening in the debate.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Which doesn't come to a vote.
Which does not involve a vote.
No.
So what does the SNP expect to gain from this evening?
Well, again, it's as I said,
is it just to get
it is to get it out front and centre on the table, and then
to be able to refer to it.
We can use it to refer back to, and saying that this has been discussed.
This is the second time it's been discussed.
You've sort of like, for all intents and purposes, you've signed off on it.
Okay, so as far as I can understand it, the Claim of Right is not actually a part of Scots law at the moment, but it's going to be the way in which the issue of the right to have this vote is going to be framed in any legal challenge. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's quite a complicated legal series of manoeuvres that we have to get our heads around here about how this might work out.
Well, yeah, but got to remember that we've got a very good legal head in our team.
Several, I think. Several. There's many lawyers in the SNP's leadership, I understand.
There is, yeah. But the one that stands out for me is obviously Joanna Cherry. And
she's certainly the most visible.
She will be all over this little rash. I have no doubt. But Patricia Gibson actually taught my children at school, so that's how long I've known Patricia. Okay. And she is like, if I hope she doesn't mind me using this, but she is like a dog with a bone. She will not let this go.
Exactly the sort of person the SNP needs for
this.
Oh,
definitely. And she's very eloquent, she's very clear, concise, and you can just she's brimming with emotion when she talks on this subject.
Yeah, I just want to remind our viewers, Chris, that they can tune in actually to see this debate live on Broadcasting Scotland tonight
excellent.
at 10 o'clock.
Excellent.
So we will be covering that. We're going to move on, Chris, to our next story, which is another SNP story. And this time, the Scottish National Party is demanding the Tories match Scottish NHS spending in NHS funding bill. Now it's the Westminster funding that they're looking to have brought up.
Yep.
The English NHS. So the SNP has demanded that the UK government match Scottish per capita NHS spending to allow Holyrood to increase funding for NHS Scotland by billions. The call came from the second reading of the NHS funding bill in the House of Commons today, and if heeded, would allow the Scottish Government to increase NHS Scotland funding by over £4 billion by the end of this UK Parliament in 2024-25. Despite the cuts to Scotland's frontline budget from Westminster that total over £1.5 billion in real terms between 2010 and 2011 and 2019-2020, health funding in Scotland has increased to record levels. This year, health spending in Scotland will exceed the record high level of £14 billion, with resource funding of up to 52.6% under the SNP. The SNP Scottish Government have already abolished prescription charges, extended free personal care to all under 65-year-olds who need it, delivered higher NHS staffing per head than NHS England, secured the highest number of GPs per head of population in the UK, and ensured that Scotland's core accident and emergency services are the best performing in the United Kingdom. SNP MPs at Westminster will bring forward a vital NHS protection bill to protect the NHS from any future trade deals. In commenting, the SNP Shadow Health Secretary, Dr Philippa Whitford, said, "While the NHS is devolved in Scotland, it cannot escape the impact of Tory austerity if we remain a part of Brexit Britain." The SNP Scottish Government has significantly raised funding to improve our NHS and to extend free personal care even to more people, while the Tory Government have drastically cut social care funding and undermined the NHS in England with a decade of outsourcing, fragmentation and frozen budgets. All health services are facing challenges, particularly rising demand and workforce shortages. But while the SNP is focused on improving our NHS, Boris Johnson threatens it with his disastrous Brexit deal, which is already making it harder to attract NHS staff, and his trade deal with Trump, which could see soaring drug costs. And that's why the SNP are calling on the UK government to match Scottish per capita funding, so that the Scottish government can increase funding for health and social care by another £4 billion by 2025 to help it secure a bright future. So, another one of these very popular, I think, kind of policies from the SNP, that they have pursued a series of policies of raising the funding for the Scottish NHS and making social care available to people even under the age of 65 now as well.
Yeah.
Why are they now, do you think, asking the UK government to raise their spending? What's the thinking behind this?
Well, I mean, it's basically if you pitch high to try and get as much as you can, knowing the fact that you're not going to get what you're asking for.
What about the Barnett formula? How does it affect that, Chris?
Well, again, with that, it's a difficult sum to try and sort of like crash out. But basically, what is spent in England, theoretically,
it has to be reflected in Scottish funding, does it not?
In Scotland, yeah. But over the past couple of years, we have seen the Barnett formula being reduced.
It's because the English government is reducing its spending on its NHS. That's depriving us of corresponding Barnett formula funding.
It's reducing ours, but that's what I'm saying. But then, the Scottish government have topped up that Barnett formula
mitigated it
in order to maintain the services in which Scotland enjoys.
So they've had to make up the shortfall from their own funding.
Yeah, yeah.
From other areas.
From other
presumably. They had to
areas.
rob other areas.
Yeah, yeah. And basically you're robbing Paul to pay Peter.
So to be clear, the reason for this today then is that if the British government then raises funding for its NHS, then there'll be a corresponding rise in funds under the Barnett formula as a consequence of that.
Yeah, but you can tie this story into the last two stories,
Yeah.
really, because again, it's shown Scotland asking for a fair and equal settlement as we are to be a respected member of the Union, and if this is not delivered, it's yet another nail in the coffin for the Union.
Is it not true, Chris, that because health in Scotland, the health service in Scotland is devolved, as we know.
Yeah.
So in England it's reserved, but if the English government cuts its funding, it cuts Scottish funding as a result of that, which means that although we Scottish MPs are not allowed to vote on English health spending,
correct,
English health spending is driving the cuts.
The cuts which happened in Scotland.
So this is evil. This is the English votes for English
laws,
working against the interest of the Scottish Health Service.
Yeah, which it was always designed to do.
Okay.
And again, with that, you add in the fact that we first spoke about migration, and if we don't get a nuanced migration policy for Scotland, then our NHS is going to suffer because you know the social care is integrated within our NHS, and we need more immigration to fill those vacancies.
And I think Philippa Whitford has actually spoken in the debate in the chamber just before we went on air tonight. So. And she is very passionate because as a medic herself.
She is a medic herself, yeah, she is.
Okay. Chris, we're going to move on to our next story now. And again, this is again the UK government, involves the UK government, and it involves the SNP as well. So the UK government has refused to publish analysis of the impact of universal credit and the two-child cap policies. The SNP has challenged the Tories on the growing scandal of their shameful record on poverty, after a new Freedom of Information request revealed that the UK government is refusing to release the analysis of its impact of its hated universal credit and the two-child cap flagship policies. The SNP's Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Neil Gray MP, said the Freedom of Information response published today by the Poverty Alliance showed the Tory government couldn't care less about the soaring poverty levels caused by its austerity policies. The UK government Freedom of Information response suggests it has done no analysis of the impact of the 5-week wait for universal credit on levels of poverty, food insecurity and destitution, and is refusing to release analysis of the two-child cap's impact on levels of poverty, claiming that it would amount to a premature disclosure. In commenting, the SNP Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Neil Gray, said today, "It's clear that the Tory government couldn't care less about the devastating impact its austerity policies are having on millions of families, with soaring levels of poverty, food insecurity and destitution. The UK government must release analysis of the impact of the two-child cap that it's having on poverty. It's a scandal that they are refusing to disclose this information to the Poverty Alliance. Tory ministers must also release analysis of the impact of the 5-week wait for universal credit, or explain whether and why they really have done no analysis of their hated flagship policy." Now, Chris, you and I know that this policy, the universal credit for a start, is deeply unpopular.
Horrendous.
And the 5-week wait has been driving people to use food banks, driving people, in some cases, extreme cases, to suicide and self-harm. And this, again, appears to be another plea falling on deaf ears.
Reading that story, it's absolutely shocking, the fact that they won't release an analysis. And it sounds to me like they are in fear of that analysis showing them up for the actual they're absolutely, as Neil Gray said there, they're just uncaring. You know, and this Freedom of Information would expose them for the party of what they are.
The Freedom of Information Act, I've noticed in the past, has often run into difficulties like this, because although it claims that you can have freedom of information under this mechanism, there is nearly always a civil servant in there who can decide whether it's going to hurt the government or not to release it, and can withhold it for virtually any reason they wish, it seems.
Somebody once said to me that Westminster is like a big shock absorber. You know, I mean, good things go into it, you know, and it gets kicked about and battered about, and then it comes out a shadow of its former self. Do
you think the civil service sees its role as actually protecting government from exposure?
They have to, because you know, I mean, everybody knows it's common knowledge that universal credit and the two-child cap was a heinous policy that was inflicted on us to supercharge austerity even further. And keep the working classes down, and as you rightly highlighted, forcing people into food bank use, right? Which the recent report by the Trussell Trust now has seen it quadruple in size in the last couple of years. There are more food banks than what there are McDonald's.
Yes, I remember them mentioning that was a headline that I remember from previously.
It's absolutely shocking.
Well, I'm going to move on now, because I know this is a subject that we both feel hotly about, food banks. But we're going to move on to our friends at the BBC now.
Oh yes.
And the new Director General of the BBC should make delivering for Scotland a priority after decades of underfunding and underrepresentation. Writing in today's National, SNP Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport and former BBC presenter John Nicholson MP renewed the SNP's commitment to public service broadcasting and set out 5 ambitions that the party believes the new Director General must address, including ensuring the BBC adequately represents the realities and complexities of devolution, which I think could run into a lot of pages by the sound of it. It's also to ensure fair funding for BBC Scotland to tackle the historical underspend on programming by the BBC in Scotland. And in 2015-16, the BBC raised over £320 million from the licence fee in Scotland, but only 54% of this revenue went on programming in Scotland. The funding for BBC Scotland channel pales in comparison to channels such as RTE1. They also say that they should transfer broadcasting control to Scotland with greater responsibility and budgetary control to be moved from BBC Network to BBC Scotland, investing serious funding in and developing more broadcasting autonomy to Scotland. They also believe that they should challenge the UK government to ensure appropriate scrutiny and to take responsibility for retaining the free TV licences for over 75s. Tory ministers can't be allowed to dictate what programmes they appear on. The BBC should not have buckled under Tory pressure to accept responsibility for a UK government social provision. And finally, they say they should ensure that the BBC tackles its gender pay gap. The BBC must stop fighting its female staff through employment tribunals simply because they demand pay parity. Now, John Nicholson went on to say that the SNP always defend public service broadcasting, but the BBC must do more to deliver for Scotland. Now, Chris, you and I sitting in a studio ourselves.
An independent studio.
An independent studio which believes very strongly in public service broadcasting. We obviously have a bit of an iron in the fire here, but what's your response to this demand from the SNP?
Again, I'm just loving the fact that the SNP are just coming out with all these demands, knowing that they're not going to be granted.
Pushed back.
They're going to get pushed back. And forever and a day, if Boris Johnson keeps saying no, eventually the penny is going to drop in Scotland to the people, and they're going to go, we just can't take this anymore.
Well, I've just been hearing the the new set for EastEnders cost £87 million,
Uh-huh.
which actually was a larger budget than for the whole of the new Scottish TV channel that the BBC created. They spent that money on a set for one soap opera.
Yeah.
And we have, 32 million spent on this new Scottish television channel by the BBC.
Aye.
And Broadcasting Scotland have spent 30,000 on their channel. And I think that's very good value, Chris.
Thanks very much to the viewers for doing that and keeping us on the airwaves. But the point that John Nicholson also made was that he actually, I mean, he is so knowledgeable in this field.
Well, he is, yes. As a former broadcaster and a BBC
journalist
himself at one time.
You know, he's obviously got an iron in the fire as well. But he makes a point that he actually reckons that the BBC 9 programme, which goes out on BBC Scotland Shire, I think that should be on
the mainstream BBC
on the
one.
mainstream at 6 o'clock.
Instead of
the the old Haggard report in Scotland thing.
Well, I'm going to have to leave that story there for the moment, Chris. We're moving along fairly quickly now to matters to do with fishing. And fishing leaders have warned of a Tory sellout in the Brexit talks. Have we heard this before?
Indeed.
Fishing leaders have warned the UK government not to sell out Scotland's seafood industry after a leaked EU memo suggested that the Tories will roll back on key promises. According to the Press and Journal, the European Council has promised its members it will demonstrate particular vigilance in protecting fishing enterprises and coastal communities, rubbishing the Tories' promises that the UK will have complete control of its waters after Brexit. Last week, Charles Grant, the director of the Centre of European Reform, told the Holyrood Committee that senior UK government officials had indicated that they would trade off or bargain with Scottish fishing to get a better deal on financial services. So there we are. There's it in words there that this EU official has said that he has heard UK officials
one better, actually,
saying that they're prepared to sell Scottish fishing in favour of a better deal for the City of London, it would seem.
Yeah. You want me to go one better?
Well, I'm dying to hear this, Chris.
Michel Barnier was over in Ireland talking to Leo Varadkar today, and he was basically putting out the fact that the EU want to have the same rights to fishing access as they have now.
Is this in Scotland or in Ireland?
This is
around the coast of the United Kingdom and Ireland?
Around the coast of the UK.
Okay.
Right? Now, for Britain then to say that it would be prepared to offer up the fishing rights for in
exchange for a better deal for London and transporting and all that.
For the financial services, brings home the fact is what the SNP were saying all along, is the fact that it's going to be another sellout in the fishing industry, similar to what happened in 1974, or was it 73? I can't remember. It was one
so basically
of those years.
what they're saying is that when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, they're prepared to sacrifice Scottish fishing rights in order to protect the City of London's financial services sector. Again,
right? So, I mean, basically, they because the UK government at this moment in time control or will be seen to be in control of all the fishing rights around the UK, it could then turn around and say, see from Berwick upwards, the EU, you can have whatever you want, fill your boots, right? But you know, down in Dover and Cornwall and all the rest of it, you can't come near our shores.
Well, Chris, we'll need to move on tonight. We've got so many stories to get through. The next story is actually about the coronavirus. Now this, as we know, is a virus which has arisen from China. As of the 27th of January, a total of 7 Scottish tests have been concluded, all 7 of which were confirmed negative. There are currently no confirmed cases in the UK or of UK citizens abroad, and the risk to the public is low. The government is monitoring the situation closely and will continue to work with the World World Health Organization and the international community. In China, the coronavirus death toll has reached 81, and there have been calls for the Foreign Office to repatriate UK nationals in Wuhan, where the outbreak began. A spokesman for Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that Britain is talking to international partners to find solutions to help British and other foreign nationals leave the Chinese city of Wuhan, the centre of a coronavirus outbreak. The Foreign Office have said that this morning that they're exploring options for British nationals leaving the province. The Foreign Office are in close contact with international partners, including the US and European countries, to investigate possible solutions, the spokespersons told reporters. The safety of British nationals is our top priority. There was a British national interviewed, I believe, last night, who said that no such thing had happened. That he hadn't had any help.
The female teacher.
Yeah,
I think she was a teacher. And she was basically saying that the response from the British consulate was
of course
shocking.
Of course, the problem is they can't just airlift a bunch of Brits out of Wuhan in case they have contracted the virus as well, which would make the situation even worse. Well, everybody in the plane could catch the virus if just one person is breathing it.
Yeah, but again, the UK government have already said that they've got a special area at Heathrow for any flights coming out of Wuhan.
Area,
So therefore, it is going to be completely separated from anyone, from any other flight that's coming into Heathrow. But as you say, that interview with that young lady there saying, the response from the UK embassy was absolutely non-existent and woeful.
Well, Chris, we're going to move on again to yet another scandal. In this case, the Grenfell inquiry. Phase 2 of the public inquiry into the 2017 fire at London's Grenfell Tower, which killed 72 people, began to zero in on Monday on how the densely populated social housing block was allowed to become a tinderbox and who was to blame. In its first phase, now complete, the public inquiry, led by retired Judge Martin Moore-Bick, examined in forensic detail the sequence of events on the night of the blaze. The second phase will look into the events in the years leading up to the fire, in particular recent refurbishment during which flammable cladding was fitted to the external walls, a key factor in the rapid spread of the fire. Witnesses will give evidence in the Phase 2 public hearings and will include representatives from the architects, the contractors, the subcontractors who carried out the refurbishment, and also from the makers and sellers of the cladding. In a statement introducing Phase 2, the inquiry's lead counsel, Richard Millett, said that out of all the bodies involved in the refurbishment, only Kensington and Chelsea Local Authority, which commissioned it, had admitted any failings. In written statements submitted by their lawyers, the companies involved had refused to admit any mistakes or substandard work, Millett said, describing their attitude as a merry-go-round of buck passing. One finds in these detailed and carefully crafted statements no trace of any acceptance of responsibility for what happened at Grenfell Tower, he said. The company that made the cladding panels on Grenfell Tower knew in 2011 that they were not suitable for use on building facades and performed worse in fire tests than declared on the safety certificates. A public inquiry into this disaster is held. On the opening day of the second phase of the inquiry, bereaved relatives and survivors heard claims that Arconic knew the fire performance of its Reynobond polyethylene-filled panels was below the minimum standard required for facades in Europe. The panels went on to be used in Grenfell with the knowledge of the multi-million-dollar US conglomerate, and its representative was pleased when the product was selected, the inquiry heard. Claude Werle, the Arconic official, explained in internal emails in June and July 2011 how the fire rating of the panels had dropped to Class E from Class B, and they were therefore unsuitable for use on building facades in Europe. But he said, we can still work with regulators who are not as restrictive. The panels were later fitted on Grenfell during its refurbishment between 2014 and 2016, and the first phase of the inquiry last year concluded that they were the primary cause of the spread of the fire. Listening in the seats reserved for the bereaved and survivors were Nabil Choucair, who lost 6 members of his family, Karim Moussihi, who lost his uncle, and Marcio Gomez, who led his pregnant wife and their 2 daughters to safety from their 21st floor home. The Arconic emails were introduced by Marcus Taverner QC, the councillor for Ryden, the main contractor, who said Arconic continued to use the Class B certificate to promote sales of Reynobond and did so specifically in the case of Grenfell Tower. In 2015, Worrell said another email to Arconic's that Arconic's Raybond panels filled with combustible polyethylene were dangerous on facades and everything should be transferred to fire retardant as a matter of urgency. Worrell added that he recognised his opinion was technical and anti-commercial. The inquiry also heard that Celotex, the company which made the combustible insulation which lay behind the cladding panels, was concerned in 2013 about how it would behave in a fire when used in cladding panels. Celotex officials emailed colleagues in November 2013. Do we take the view that our product realistically shouldn't be used behind most cladding because in the event of a fire it would burn? Ryden sought to argue that while it was the main contractor on the project, it worked with other experts and subcontractors, that the civil liability and moral culpability must be considered in the light of how different parties met their contractual obligations. It said that architects, cladding subcontractor, the fire engineer, building control or landlord were involved in drawing up the specification. But none said that using Reynobond PE or Celotex RS5000, either individually or together, posed a risk to the health and safety of the occupants of Grenfell Tower. Privately owned British firm Rydon was the main contractor in charge of the refurbishment. The cladding supplier was the UK firm Arconic Inc., while the makers of the insulation material used as part of the cladding system were Celotex Corp, or a US subsidiary of France's Saint-Gobain. London's Metropolitan Police, who are conducting their own investigation into the fire, and said that they were considering possible criminal charges, including gross negligence, manslaughter, corporate manslaughter, and breaches of the Health and Safety Act. But the police have said they would not announce any decisions on charges until the public inquiry had concluded, because they needed to take into account its findings. Millett warned the corporates not to treat the inquiry as a dress rehearsal for other possible criminal or civil actions. Those who escaped from the burning building with their lives and lost loved ones are owed at least an honest and complete account from those witnesses who are in a position to explain what happened. Studio E, the architect, said it believed the building regulations were not fit for purpose. It did not know the materials it selected were in breach of building regulations, and the materials manufacturers provided safety testing data that misled designers to consider that their products were safe. It said that it was Building Services Engineers Max Fordham, another consultant, which proposed the use of combustible insulation, and that Rydon had the power to change the materials, but said that its position was not an attempt to pass the buck. Studio E will listen carefully, the architect firm said. The company wants to understand and learn, however painful that may be. Phase 1 of the inquiry established that the fire had started in a 4th floor flat due to a faulty refrigerator, before breaking out into the external cladding and engulfing the tower, re-entering the building via the windows. Now, Chris, I know that you probably watched this burning building the night this happened, the same as I did. I was appalled at the speed at which the fire spread up the outside. But it seems like all of these companies who are giving evidence today as technical witnesses are trying to move the blame onto somebody else.
And I actually, in a former life, I used to be a aerial and satellite engineer, and having dealt with cladded buildings, there is a natural expansion gap between the brick,
an airspace between the outer wall,
and that cavity creates obviously a suction,
a chimney effect,
a jet. It's basically a suction drive. You know, and you know, to pierce that membrane was sacrosanct. You just didn't drill into it.
You didn't put a wire through it or anything like that.
No, you just couldn't do that. You know, because it actually broke the whole integrity of the the actual clad. But I mean, I have heard say that the reason, or one of the reasons that this clad was chosen was because of its exterior design. It was more pleasing to the eye of the people in the bot houses around it than what it was, you know, any other.
So basically, you think that really they were trying to tart up the tower block to make
basically, yes,
to keep the house prices up in the
yeah,
local area.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I mean,
that's what you would speculate.
At the crux of this matter is that had sprinklers been fitted retrospectively into that tower block, then it could have reduced the actual outcome of what happened in that terrible night.
All right. Well, Chris, we're going to move on now to Donald Trump and his impeachment trial. Now, President Donald Trump's fellow Republicans in the US Senate came under fresh pressure on Monday to allow witnesses and new documents in his impeachment trial after a news report from a former top aide, John Bolton, has written a book manuscript that undercuts Trump's versions of events in the Ukraine affair. Republican Senator Mitt Romney, a sometime critic of Trump, said that there was a growing likelihood that at least 4 Republican senators would vote to call for Bolton to testify in the trial, which would give the Democrats the votes necessary to summon the former National Security Advisor. Senate Republicans thus far have refused to allow any witnesses or new evidence in the trial that will determine whether Trump is removed from office. The president's legal team is set to resume its defense of Trump on Monday afternoon. So Donald Trump's ongoing difficulties, his own allies are trying to protect him by
and
preventing witnesses coming forward.
They will do anything to try and put a spanner in the works, shall we say.
And this is coming out in a book published this week in America.
I don't actually think that Mr. Trump took that into consideration. The fact that someone was at liberty to write a book and coincide its production. I think the timing's actually spot on there. But the more importantly is the fact that he has got people willing to bury information in order that they do not have to subpoena anyone else in order to give any further possibly.
Well, the question now is whether Republican senators can be swayed enough to allow some of this evidence and some of these witnesses to be brought forward based on what's coming out from this.
Well, yeah, again, I mean, going back to what you were saying earlier about our government suppressing the freedom of information and stuff like that, you're wondering how much information is actually going to be suppressed over there, because
well, the margins are
Trump will be, rallying the troops round in order to sort of like circle the wagons.
Well, I think speaking of keeping things secret, we're going to move on to a story now, which basically this is about Boris Johnson and the attempt to install a 5G network in the UK and its difficulties over the use of Chinese equipment made by the company Huawei. Yeah. Now, Boris Johnson has suggested that he will arrive at a compromise solution over the decision whether to let the Chinese company Huawei build parts of the UK's 5G network in the face of US warnings that it will compromise intelligence sharing. During a university visit, the Prime Minister hinted that he would give Huawei some role in building the high-speed networks, but he faces considerable scepticism from conservative backbenchers who used a parliamentary debate to raise concerns. Speaking at King's College London Mathematics School after launching a post-Brexit visa plan, Boris insisted that there was a solution, that there could be a solution, and that that was very, very important strategic win for the UK, he said. The way forward for us clearly is to have a system that delivers for the people of this country the kind of consumer benefits that they want through 5G technology. Now, the Five Eyes security relationships that we have, we've got to keep them strong and safe. The final decision is expected on Tuesday at a meeting of National Security Council. When pressed on what that decision would be, Johnson said, "We're going to come up with a solution that enables us to achieve both of these objectives, and that's the way forward." There is apparently an emergency question. There was an emergency question on this in Parliament. Now, there's no reason why we shouldn't have technological progress here. Several senior Conservatives echoed the concerns, with one backbencher, former party leader Ian Duncan Smith, saying he had been told previously that Johnson would opt for a total ban on Huawei in line with US demands. "I was led to believe this government would not make that decision," he said. Labour frontbencher Tracy Brabin accused Johnson of doing a runner by not turning up to Parliament and leaving the government's response to Culture Minister Matt Warman. But Kevin Jones, a Labour backbencher and former member of the Intelligence and Security Committee, said that the committee, which has access to classified material and has reviewed Huawei, said, "From briefings and information I have seen, I think that any risk can be mitigated." The US has stepped up its warnings in recent weeks against Britain allowing Huawei any role at all, urging the Prime Minister to match its ban because of fears that China could exploit security loopholes in order to spy on British citizens. So, Chris, here we are again at this story that somehow or other the Chinese government or some other agency from China is somehow embedding spying software or something into these Huawei hardware items.
Yeah, according to Donald Trump.
And is this just scaremongering, or is there anything behind this, do you think?
There's been an awful lot of talk about Huawei products, and people have got, you get into the lines of conspiracy theories and stuff like that with this kind of chat. But the overarching thing from this is the fact that it sounds to me like Donald Trump is dictating to Boris Johnson what he should do and what he shouldn't do. And that's very dangerous if Boris Johnson starts basically doing what his master tells him to do.
Do you think there's maybe a commercial interest at work here from some other company who are trying to dislodge Huawei from the 5G contracts in the UK?
Well, as we know, there are many mobile companies in Silicon Valley in America, that would love to have the UK contract.
But of course, this is not the mobile companies as we know them. This is not like Vodafone or EE. This is an actual infrastructure.
Infrastructure and manufacturer as well.
Yeah, I mean but Huawei, although they manufacture cell phones in large numbers, they also manufacture a huge amount of hardware and export it all over the world, and all of the networking hardware and servers and all the rest of it are exported. In the UK, already here, some of them, apparently already in place and fitted.
But they're not the only show in town, and this is the thing that I think that Boris Johnson forgets. There are 6 or 7 other companies to choose from.
Apparently, Huawei, out of all the Chinese manufacturing companies in this field, appear to be the only company which have links to the Chinese government. And also, there are many companies across the world which use Huawei components as well. But the thing is that we could cast conspiracy theories around. Yeah. But of course, Huawei has many competitors across the globe who would be delighted. I mean, there'll be big corporations who are desperate for Huawei to be bumped out of here.
Yes,
Ericsson is one that has been mentioned.
Springs to mind, but that's why I'm saying is the fact that Boris Johnson needs to understand that Huawei are not the one-trick pony that he thinks they are, but equally, he shouldn't be taking dictation from Donald Trump.
He should really just take the advice of his own security advisors, you would think.
Well,
surely they know their
that's
business.
What they're there for, apparently. But the other thing that Boris Johnson is looking at is the fact that, look what we've achieved after Brexit. I've reached across and made a deal with this, you know, a Chinese company and all the rest of it, Huawei. And isn't this, you know, absolutely wonderful? See what we can do now, you know, that we're out of the EU.
But without the American security corporations involvement,
Yeah.
cooperation involved,
Cooperation, yeah.
then the United Kingdom's relationship, the so-called special relationship with the US,
Yeah.
could be threatened by this.
Exactly, yeah. So he's on a sticky wicket. And it's surprising, actually, it was Ian Duncan Smith that
Had a go
raised
at him.
this.
Yeah.
Aye,
Yeah.
aye.
Okay, well, listen, I've got to
Rather
move on, Chris.
refreshing.
We are running low on time, so our final item tonight is a lot more serious, and it is, of course, 75 years since the liberation of the Belsen concentration camp at the end of World War II. And so World Holocaust Memorial Day is today, and world leaders and Holocaust survivors have gathered at the site of the former Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz to mark the 75th anniversary of the camp's liberation. 200 survivors of the Holocaust were expected to attend, with visitors drawn from Israel, the US, Australia, Peru, Russia, Slovenia and elsewhere. As well as survivors of the camps, many bereaved relatives of those killed during the genocide were also attending. To mark Holocaust Memorial Day in Scotland, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said, "Holocaust Memorial Day is an important reminder to the millions of people who were murdered or for those whose lives were changed forever during the Holocaust and other genocides. By marking this date, we must reflect upon and learn the important lessons from these horrendous acts of violence and terror. We pay tribute to the survivors who were forced to flee their homes and livelihoods in the face of unthinkable persecution. We also honour the legacy of those who demonstrated immense bravery and courage fighting for liberty, freedom and justice, many of whom sadly paid with their own lives. This year is particularly poignant as we observe the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and 25 years since the genocide in Srebrenica. The theme for this Holocaust Memorial Day, Stand Together, highlights the importance of our collective societal responsibility to stand against hatred and prejudice and to promote strong, inclusive and respectful communities. We all need to work together to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, their race, faith or sexuality, is treated with equal respect and dignity. Today's announcement of funding for security measures to protect our places of worship against hate crime will help to promote the very clear message that hatred and prejudice will not be tolerated in Scotland." So it's a sad day in a way, isn't it? Because what we're marking here was the discovery of probably the greatest crime in human history. Something which shocked the world at the time, and it continues to do so.
It has been said that, and if viewers can try and sort of picture this in their mind, but it was actually the Red Army
the Russians got there first.
Liberated, and if you think of a soldier in the Russian Red Army at that time, and they were reduced to absolute tears.
Yeah, it must have been terribly distressing.
You know, it's a sight that you know you would never want to see, yet you would never be able to understand.
Yep.
I
remember somebody referring to it as a human abattoir. And I think that's probably the worst mental image you could come up with for something like that.
Yeah, but I tell you, I have visited two camps. I haven't visited Auschwitz. I tend to do so. But I've been to Terezin, just outside Prague, and I've been to Stutthof, just outside Gdansk.
Of course, there were many of these camps.
There were
Auschwitz and Belsen were probably the most notorious and the largest.
They were the two main largest camps, but there was also a plethora of sub-camps all around.
Of course, the Nazi regime was very careful to conceal what it was doing by placing these camps outside of Germany, in places where people couldn't see.
Yeah, and there were
some in Germany too, but but
they were also strategically placed off the beaten track.
And it couldn't be found easily.
There was often like sort of a mile drive through a wooded area, and you know, and then you get out of the trees and you came upon this clearing, particularly the case of Terrorism. It's you know, to actually see how those buildings have been preserved, and rightly so, they've been preserved.
It is grim,
because
isn't it,
if they had taken the decision to flatten it, then
the memory could be lost.
The memory would have been lost, and it wouldn't have the impact that it has on today.
Chris, I'm really sorry, but I'm running out of time. I've just got time to say to our viewers tonight that, remember, we will be having a live feed from House of Commons at 10 o'clock tonight about this debate on the claim of right. And we have an interview with Hassan Hassanovic. And he is from Srebrenica, and we will be talking about. And also we will be talking to Jane Weber, an Auschwitz survivor. So we'll be talking to two people on Wednesday who have survived 2 different attempts at genocide. So that's to come later in the week. Remember to tune in tonight at 10 o'clock to watch our coverage of the debate on the claim of right. That's it from us this evening. It just remains for me to thank Chris McCusker for joining me this evening. And to remind our viewers, as I always do at this time in the evening, that we need your help to continue making programmes. And if you wish to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, please follow the directions on the screen now. That's it from me tonight. I'll see you again on Thursday night. In the meantime, Kenny will be taking my seat tomorrow for Scotland at 7. That's it from us tonight. Very good night to you.